TRS, a peculiar kind of strength that lives in silence. Not the silence born from fear or weakness, but the deliberate, calculated silencio tatarisis, buen jublernet. Toma stertemos tangeros force within you. Your immediate reaction, Ibn Arabi, te dolceta centri sufis mystic, understood something that most people spend their entire lives running from, that has to be between stimulus and response, is where true power resides. But this isn't the power they sell you in motivational speeches or self-help books. This is the power that isolates you. That makes you incomprehensible. Todos estilos la voz vitae impulses. Te hiciste power that no one will understand. And perhaps that is exactly why it matters. Think about the last time someone said something that pierced through your defenses. Words that landed like arrows into soft tissue of your ego. What happened next for most people? Their reaction is instantaneous. Verbal counterattack, a defensive posture. An emotional eruption that fails rictus in the moment, that leaves destruction in its wake. Dehuman nervous systems wired for survival, not for wisdom. When we perceive a threat, whether physical or psychological, our ancient brain activates the same mechanisms that once kept us alive in the wilderness, but we're no longer running from predators. Te trade su face nauere suble psicológica. Bua rapi piek. Te intenses antisocial dynamics, and yet you react as if all lives depend on it. Because insomnia primal, why we believe they do. Ibn Arabi spoke of the perfect human, the insan al-kamil being who has achieved it, such profound self-awareness that they become a mirror, reflecting divine attributes rather than personal distortions. Ici sientes mystical abstraction reserved for saints and scholars. Itesea psicológica. Estatetate emerges. When you've done it, brutal war coffee. Excavating your own unconscious programming. When you abuse a tweet, your wounds. Long enough to understand that most of your reactions aren't reacting. You're satelled, they're echoes of your childhood. Repetitions of your traumas. Defensive maneuvers. Learned when you were too young to know better. The power of not reacting begins with this. Uncomfortable recognition. Most of what you think is you is actually just Leonard Weber tricereda automática. Y vi circunstancias que te vieron y superficie tutti original wounds. When you begin to see it as machinery in operation, something strange happens. There is a moment, often fleeting at first, when you can observe it, an impulse to react to you, to immediately acting on Italian. You feel the anger rising to defensive energies, crystallizing, the words forming in your mouth. But instead of really, I think they like a pressure valve. You owe them in conscious awareness. This welding isn't suppression. Suppression is pushing something down into the basement of your psyche, where it fermented sand grows more toxic. This is different. This is witnessing. This is standing in the gap between what you would be in and what you would become, watching the old patterns fire. We told he been them permission to control your behavior, and then that's pass. That tiny interval of conscious choice. Something extraordinary becomes possible. Ibn Arabi described reality as a series of mirrors, reflecting the divine essence. Each creature a unique refraction of a singular light, but most mirrors are distorted, covered in the grimy of conditioning, cracked by trauma, warped by the desperate need to protect. A fragile essence of self. When someone triggers you, what you'll realize in gizinte tematolitize, your own distortion reflected by to you, they be activated. Some tingle ready present tweeting you, some unresolved tension, some protected vulnerability. The person who can remain in a reactive as learning this fundamental truth. The external world is constantly revealing your internal landscape baton leaf. You're willing to look without the distortion of immediate defense. This is where it hits lonely, because most human relationships are Wilton predictable, patterns of action and reaction. So may one attacks you, defend. So me one criticizes you, justify. So me one abandons you, cling. These patterns create a kind of psychological contract, an unspoken agreement about how to dance. Of interaction will unfold. But when you stop reacting predictably, you break the contract. People don't techno what to do with you anymore. They push button, status set to activate you and find nothing. They look for the old version of you. what could have been controlled through manipulation or guilt or anger, and discovered that version has been retired. This makes you dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with aggression and everything to do with freedom to suffer. That type of narrative articulated was not about transcending humanity or escaping into spiritual bypass. It was about becoming so fully human, so completely present to the totality of experience, that you no longer need the defensive structures that most people mistake for identity. Think about it. What are you without your reactions? Strip away the automatic responses. Crearse defenses, the predictable patterns of behavior. And what remains for most people, this question induces a kind of existential vertigo. Because we were built, our entire sense of self on these reactions, we can go ourselves beyond. We respond to provocations. We our preferences and our versions. We the stories we tell about who we are and who we are. But there is another possibility, whispered into teachings of mystics across traditions, confirmed into laboratories of modern neuroscience, and discovered into our one experience of anyone who has done the psychological work. You are not your reactions. Duality awareness in which reactions arise and pass. Duality is passé not to content. T'existe philosophical abstraction et de practical libération. When you realize you can observe your reaction to it, all being controlled by them, you will be accessed a form of power that renders most external manipulation ineffective. Someone can insult you, betray you, diminish you, and will you feel the impact? You don't become Italiano. You don't transform your poison into your identity. Ibn Arabi's concept of the barzakh, the isthmus between heaven and earth, describes this state perfectly. You enter world but not entirely of Italiano. You participate in human drama, while maintaining connection to. So meeting that transcends Italiano, this isn't detachment in the sense of not caring. It's sad, per engagement that comes from not being reactive. When you're not busy defending yourself, you can actualize in what is your opinion. You can respond with precision rather than reflex. You can choose strategic silence. Instead of emotional vomiting, you can let someone else angel crush against the sore of your presence. Anticipated with all that in your own felt to fire. The paradox is that this non-reactive state of the near Zaskin Agnes Toto, still trapped in reactive patterns. They interpret your silence as submission, your composure as cowardice, your refusal to engage as evidence of your inability to defend yourself, and you have to be okay with that misinterpretation. Because explaining your non-reaction defeats its purpose. The moment you start justifying you're not reacting, you'll be and put your bike into the reactive loop. You'll be given your power away to their evaluation of your behavior. Petrol in non-reactive person doesn't need others to understand. They have found validation in something. The expert on social approval. This brings us to one of the most challenging aspects of developing this power isolation, not physical isolation necessarily, but psychological solitude. When you stop participating in the collective reactivity that brings most social groups together, you become an outsider. Think about how much of a bonding is based on said reactions. Collective outrage, mutual gossip. Con mon enemigo sincroniza the emotional responses. When you withdraw your participation from this dynamics, people feel it as rejection. They sense that you are operating from a different paradigm, and it makes them uncomfortable. Some will try to pull you by quinto reactivity, throw up provocation. Others will simply drift away seeking connection. Sweet people will still play it familiar. Kem Ibn Arabi spent years in what is tradition. Kais Kalu spiritual retreat and seclusion, not because of humanity bad, because the work of policing, the mirror of consciousness, requires distance from the constant static of collective reactivity. You need time and space to observe your own patterns, with all the interference of constant social stimulation. In our hyper-connected world, this kind of withdrawal seems almost impossible. We're bombarded with stimuli, designated to provoke reaction, outrage, or masquerading as news. Social media algorithms, optimized for engagement through emotional manipulation. Relationships conducted through distorted lens of digital communication. Every notification is a little test. Will you react? Will you take the bait? Will you give your attention? your energy, your power away to whatever external stimulus has been engineered. To capture it, the power of not reacting is ultimate. Elite power of attention, where you place your attention, determines the sap of your consciousness. React constantly to external stimuli, and your consciousness becomes fragmented, scattered, controlled by forces outside of yourself. Battle aren't to direct your attention consciously. To notice their reactions are single to out automatic. Acting on them and you were reclaimed. So regarding to over your own awareness. This is what I've never been able to be, your knight toward unity, not some abstract merger with the divine. But pratique l'intégration aux fautes fragmentées d'aspects, Sophia yourself into a cohérente conscience. Présence TRSA particulier, actualité off, présence state merges in peu. Développer discapacité, they seem to occupy more space. With all the drilling, they create a field of calm that others can feel. Their rewards carry more weight because they're not diluted by constant, reactive chatter when they speak. It's because they've chosen to speak, not because they've been triggered into speech. To selective participation in the noise of life makes their signal clearer, their impact more precise. Table our net to conserve energy that most people hemorrhage through constant reaction, and that conserved energy become available for more intentional pursuits. Bat Mackie, no mistake. This is not peaceful in the way most people imagine. Peace to internal work required to develop. Low non-reactivity is violent. In its own way, you have to kill versions of yourself that you've grown attached to. Joabetos y tu excruciating discomfort. A saber, if there of your bank screens for you to react, to defend, to retaliate. You have to work relationships. And because you're no longer willing to participate in toxic patterns, even when staying in those patterns would be easier, you have to face the terrifying question of who you are. With all the armor you've accumulated, in Arabic I get this process, fanatical annihilation of the false self. Modern psychology, I see to go dead regardless of terminology. De experiencia y es the same everything. Yo toque yo hubiera hasta hoy eso tatuado. Yo actuaría y haré que emerge anderese. What nobody tells you about this emergencia, y todo es innecesario lima que your life hacia in fact. In many ways it makes it harder. Because now you see things you can't even see. You recognize to reactivate patterns and never, you know around you, what people destroy themselves, and they relationship stroke, compulsive reaction, and you can't resist. You can't explain what you will learn it. Because learning came through experience, not information. You could give someone all the right words, all the correct concepts, and they still wouldn't understand. Until they did own it, they worked themselves. This is the essential only line. So far I can't get, you can't bring an onion with you. Each person has to make their own nail, only Ibn Aravis. Poco's different station, son. The spiritual path each requiring of attachment to the previous station. You can't progress via accumulating experiences or collecting insights. You progress via constantly releasing what you will, grasped bidding to what you become, so you can discover what else is possible. Apply it to the power of not reacting. This means you'll never arrive at some final state of perfect non-reactivity. Instead, you discover the deeper and more subtle layers of reactivity within yourself. Just when you think you've transcended anger, you discover pride in your transcendence. Justo en you verle acepten need for external validation. You'll discover a subtle self-satisfaction in your release. The path spirals deeper, revealing finer distinctions, more nuanced patterns, endless opportunities for self-deception. This is with the teaching is sorely understood. People want a technique, a method, a fifth-step process to achieve non-reactivity. They want to add to their collection of self-improvement strategies, another tool into toolkit of self-optimization. But non-reactivity isn't something you achieve or possess. It's what nature I emerge when you've stopped it. Ringing Toby someone when you will release it, to exhausting project of self-construction. It's the residue of the exhaust render, not the tropio of spiritual accomplishment. Considerate psicológico al mecánico, sofre acción sometingap en sinte external world. Sare spoken acción sare taken circunstancia shift. Tis external event trigger. Saca sea de of internal processos neural patua is fire. Hormones flowed your system. Memories are activated. Stories are constructed to make sense of the experience. All of this happens in milliseconds. Large helium side of conscious awareness. Be the time you're deciding or to respond to. Reaction is already in motion. What we call decision-making is often just rationalization of impulses that have already been triggered. The illusion of conscious choice masks the reality of deterministic cause and effect. You don't choose to be angry. You become angry and then construct a narrative about why your anger is justified. But the mystics discover it's something that neuroscience is now confirming. There is a split second, a tiny gap, where a conscious intervention is possible, not to stop the reaction from arising, that there's already happened, but to prevent it from cascading into action. This gap is where the practice happens. Initiate, you don't even notice the gap. You re-identified with the reaction so completely that there is no separation between stimulus and response. Grado allí true sostenida atención. Yo ve y no te dice te reacciona feo según. Su actitud ese al reyadi expressing itself. You cut yourself mid-sentence, recognizing that you were reacting rather than responding. With more practice, you notice your reaction as it's forming. But before its expressed eventuality, you can feel the impulse arise and choose whether to act on it or not. You see, since the suppression requires enormous energy. You are constantly pushing against something that wants to express itself. Non-reactivity requires no energy at all. Te reacciona narices is Fuji felt and acknowledged head. Hadn't he said you would topaz with taut expression, like clothes moving across the ski? Emotions and impulses emerge from causes and conditions, exist for their natural duration, and dissolve. The suffering comes from a meter ring to prevent them from arising, or ring to keep them alive, past their natural lifespan. Ibn Arabi pass is on, accepting all manifestations of divine reality, including what appear as negative or painful peaks. Tautis total acceptance of what is ui toda. Te compulsivo, a need to change or fix or react against Italiano. Te social implications of fui despreciado no reactivity area reward. Considering, imagine a world where people didn't automatically react to provocation, where politicians couldn't manipulate populations through fear and outrage, where advertisers cold to hijack attention through emotional triggers, where relationships weren't the eldest heavy reactive patterns, where conflicts cold be resolved through conscious response. Rather than escalating reaction, this vision makes them utopian. Patite se alzó tratando existing power. Estructuras que dependan de predictabilidad. Reactividad a población que dos entre act. Predictabilidad is mucho harder to control. This is perhaps why the ancient, like Ibn Arabi says, have always existed at the margins, never quite acceptable to religious orthodoxy or political authority. 3D relationship between reactivity and identity. We construct our sense of self, large little Hugo, our reactions, and it kind of person who stands up for myself, or what keeps the peace, or what doesn't tolerate disrespect. This is self-definitions become prisons. We have to keep reacting impredecible-wise to maintain coherence in our self-story. If you have always identified as someone who doesn't take any seat, you have to keep reacting aggressively to perceived disrespect. Even when the situation calls for a different response, your identity demands that reaction. Don't react or you will create cognitive dissonance, or you will treat and test, or you tell about, or you are. This is your genuine transformation is sorrow. It requires your inner destruction of the self, concept with feels like dead. Because in essence it is in Arabic, Estia Chingon, the unity of being without a Luke Hud suggests that separation is ultimate illusion. Tatal phenomena a manifestation. Zofa singular reality if this is true. Tenuate exactly. Are you defending when you react? If the person attacking you is ultimate, you not separate from you. If they react to your sunrise from the same source as your existence, then react to it and you'll see. If you think with yourself, isisete akalfor pasibitior, tayo wingarmi tesia recognition, that conscious response is possible. Without delusion nos fundamental separation, that tribe's reactive behavior, you can set boundaries, protect yourself, remove yourself from harmful situation, so without the energetic contraction of reactivity. The difference is palpable. Reactive defense is hot. Tic agresive fue led by adrenalina. Ante convicción cero, frío tuesness con su respuesta. Escul espacios precise, arising from clarity about what is necessary, rather than compulsion to prove something. The ultimate power of not reacting is that it returns you to yourself. Every time you react, yo bebe empujé dentro de su meone LCS orbit, your atención, your energía, your emotional state. Hoy controlé de vi externas circunstancias. You've made yourself a puppet, whose strings can be pulled, yet by anyone who knows which buttons to push. But non-reactivity is the cutting of strings. It's the reclamations of your attention as your own. It's the recognition that no one can make you feel anything without your participation. This doesn't mean you don't feel emotions arising naturally from circumstances, but you don't have to build an identity around those feelings, don't have to express them compulsively, don't have to be controlled by them. They can move through you like water, leaving no lasting mark on the ski of your consciousness. There is a particular kind of law that becomes possible when you are not reactive. Most of what passes for law is actualine, ed in disguise, and it for validation, for security, for some. You need to complete us for prove of our worthiness. TNS make us reactive. When our partner does not meet our expectations, we react with our anger or withdrawal. When they treat and tell they have, we react with panic or manipulation. Their relation should becomes a constant dance of reaction and counter-reaction. Each person triggering and being triggered. Neither person act ugly free, but when you have developed non-reactivity, a different QLTJ of relationship become possible. You can love without needing to control. You can be present without agenda. You can I know the other person, their complete humanity, without taking their struggles personally. Y si siente coldor distante, se actualita only form of real intimaki. Huere tu opoplekan befugitan selbes, without fear of triggering reactive patterns in the other. Ibn Arabi WWBR extensible. Li about Layu as the fundamental force of existence, but not Laou as emotion or romance. Thelaho as the binding force that connects all of manifestation to its source. To access this level of Laou, Juabetu dieto personal lautolauti siri ai. Just ego need wearing the mask of the Boshan. Johabeto biwijing to lawatis retatan. Demanding that reality conform to your preferences. Kissy, sweet and mystic. Pat Antipatov. Non-reactivity are ultimate elite. Same pat, but require to release of the personal will. To the act of the one who wants things to be different than they are. To surrender of the ego project that maintains separation through constant reaction. To what challenges it supreme. Iki RS what the masters want to tell you up front, because you have to discover it yourself. The freedom that comes with non-reactivity is terrifying. Most people don't. They actually want freedom. They want better change, more comfortable prisons. No sir cages. Freedom means the total burden of responsibility for your own consciousness. You can't blame anyone for what you feel. You can't claim victimhood based on what others have done to you. You can't justify your reactions as necessary. Responses to circumstances, you're completely exposed to the reality that you will always be choosing, even when choices are locked like compulsion. This level of responsibility is crossing to the ego. Weak survives by externalizing blame and claiming powerlessness, to accept that you don't to have to react. Tat jovialuizet capacité tito chose. Your response means accepting. Tatol te sufrir yobe experiences trug. Reaction was in some essence optional. Tis is almost impossible to suayo, and yet suayu it you must. If you want the power that you've been Arabi pointed toward, not the power to control others. That is just another form of reactivity. The power to be unmoved by the chaos around you. The power to remain centered, while everything external shifts and changes. The power to act from intention rather than impulse. From clarity rather than conditioning. From presence rather than pattern. This power does not announce itself. It does not need recognition nor validation. It simply expresses ed intequale ITL of your presence, the precision of your actions, the depth of your PS. People feel it. Without necessarily understanding Italiano, they sense that you are operating from a different level That the normal methods of manipulation and control, don't they work on you? That you found something. They're still searching for, but you can't explain it to them. I need attempt to teach non-reactivity, be explaining it files, because the explanation itself becomes something to me. Interest to grass and do see us, a technique to teaching, can only point the transformation as to be live it. Someone has to be so tired of stereo reactivity, so exhausted by technical of trigger and response, so don't with the patterns that have governed their life, that they're willing to sit in the fire of non-reaction, Teji Abe to feel the impulse to react. Feel ever is the inner body screaming for expression. Feel the right to own this soft air position. Fevel TSRTIT and still chose a silence. Chose Steines chose TDATOFTA11STO react. TSDATAPENSTOUSANDTIMTSIN moments 8 time, revealing another layer of the false self, that my time sits existence through reaction. Ibn Arabi is life demonstrated this teaching. It traveled extensively engaged with scholars and rulers, participated in the world, while maintaining inner solitude, even to retreat from life, but moved through it without being captured by Italiano. His WVRITING, SRBA le mano at transcended to be understood. Woke old expressed the epist troops. Will it knowing most readers world miss the point? We found PSENT in comprehension. No photos, because is validation came from direct experience. Rather than external agreement, this is the signature of non-reactivity. You're willing to be misunderstood, willing to let others think what they want. Willing to be alone with your truth, rather than compromise it for belonging. Her final teaching, the one that completes this circle, is that non-reactivity isn't about becoming a stone. It's not emotional numbness or philosophical detachment. It's the capacity to feel everything for you, without being controlled by what you feel. Tainen reactive personism, take altair on fire with presence, burning with awareness. Alibeto every nuance of experience, but tira not full 40 fire. The space in which fire burns without being consumed. This is the mystery that language can take it to capture, that can only be known through direct experience. You will become simultaneously more human, unless identified with humanity, more feeling unless controlled by feeling, more engaged unless attached to all of comes. Yo he entrado en paradojas, en la eutre confortable y en contradicción tan mases. Do sense total rational mind battle real, si es el faz de pestrufo de existencia. No one will understand this until they read it. And reading esto es, te como from intellectual comprensión. It comes from exhaustion with the alternative, from the collapse of February strategy, to ego as the project maintained control, fronte recognition that 3 activities never broke the lasting peace. Fronte willingness to diet to everything. You will be known yourself to be, when that 3 adines emerges. Tete achingis ever you are, every moment becomes an opportunity to practice. Every trigger becomes a doorway. Every reaction you don't express becomes a little dead. That feeds your transformation and slowly, imperceptibly the one who needed to react dissolves, reeling what was always there been at the noise. The power of conscious presence, the freedom of choice is less aware in this TP. How see that surpasses understanding because it doesn't depend on circumstances. This is the power Ibn Arabi understood, not the power to get what you want. Bati power to be free from the tyranny of wanting, not the power to defeat your enemies, but a power to recognize there are no enemies, only mirrors reflecting aspects of yourself. You have entered integrated, not the power to win arguments, but the power to your other stare delusions, while you remain anchored in reality. This power isolates you from the games most people play, while connecting you to so meeting. Infinitely more vast, it makes you incomprehensible to those still trapped in reactivity, while making you visible to TF. Uoba walk at the same path and it demands severity. Tinge very comfortable identity. Every cherished reaction, every strategy for control ever a need for recognition. In return, it offers only itself. The simple radical freedom of being who you are, without the constant need to prove it, defend it or react from Italiano. Most will never understand, and that perhaps is exactly as it sold be.